economy will shrink in the course of 2023. And then weren't that different compared to many others when it comes to the inflation, because inflation is just...
But restoring price stability when inflation is high can require...
Hello, welcome to Financial Stockholm. Today is January 20th, 2023, and my name is Christopher Crystal. This is Financial Stockholm, and this is what we're seeing in the news and discussions. We're getting into the earnings season, so we'll see a lot of companies coming out with their earnings, or the companies coming out with their earnings, and the expectations there, and what to expect going forward. So within Sweden, what we saw was a pretty much another night of violence. We had shootings in the north and in our nation's capital. We had people making attacks with hand grenades, machine guns, and then there was arson as well. So it's this is a struggle for the Swedish society and how to accept what's happening and what to do to approach and change it so we have a more orderly society. The discussion falls to the government and what they're going to do to handle this. And this is something that has been building up for quite some time. So there's a lot of unease there. So I think you'll see more and more people turning towards the markets and the economy to see a little bit more of orderly flow. And so with that, we do have a number of companies coming out. And they're coming out positively. So we'll talk about that in a second, because what we also have is what's going on in the Ukraine and the war efforts there. So it's a very kind of a fractured picture. You see the attacks by the Russians, and they're knocking out the power systems, and they're blowing up civilian buildings when the Ukraine is using their defense technologies. Sometimes the missiles are falling into civilian areas. That doesn't absolve the Russians of the death that they're causing, but it makes it a much more tragic instance. But at the same time, it's a question of how long will this continue, and will this be a longer term effort, which is what it looks like. This is increasingly a NATO proxy against Russia. That's even been stated by Ukrainian officials and so forth. So we see comments coming out from European ministries and discussing it. And right now, the big debate is whether German tanks will enter into the war. And Germany wants to see the American tanks go in first. Poland is pushing for the German tanks to go in, and may even already have been sending German tanks. So it's about to get a lot messier, and it's really, really very dangerous for all of us, because Putin has said he's going to go from roughly 1.1 million in troops up to 1.5 million in troops. He's going to increase. He's going to harden the borders near to places like Finland. So we have Sanna Marin from the Finnish government. She's made comments that Putin is irrelevant and cannot be allowed to do what he's done. So the war must continue until Putin is defeated. So this puts us in a long-term perspective. And really the people who are going to be suffering are the Ukrainian citizens and European economies. And this brings us to our ESG issue on what is happening and why is it happening. Once the gas was cut off and the fertilizer cost went up, there were sanctions put in, so the Russian economy should be shrinking, contracting. It has had some contraction, not in the level that the sanctions were intended. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to build up its troops. So, and you see their energy price sales are going up. So the idea is it's not working as it should, and we'll have to see how this develops. But in the meantime, we have our earnings reports coming out, and we did have a bit of an issue with the Chinese economy with their lockdowns, and then you saw the trade drop. So the expectations or the demand for Chinese trade and exporting had dropped off. We will enter into a quarter now where we start to see without the lockdowns. Hopefully the trade will pick up. But the question is, will the increased price of energy in the West affect the shipments from the East to the West? And that's because the cost of energy has replaced the desire to buy white goods, maybe refurnish homes, maybe buy new homes. So our pricing, the consumer pricing index, makes a big difference, and maybe makes a difference on how our economy develops. And so when you have groups coming out talking about ESG, and then doing things contradictory to what they're preaching, like in Germany, where the parliament approves coal mining an entire town, and using that type of energy, fossil fuels, when they're supposed to be moving away from fossil free, instead of restarting nuclear plants. At some point, the citizens start to understand that the goals they're trying to achieve are not being achieved by the policies enacted. And that's where we are. So if we look at the economy, the companies coming out here in Sweden, we start off primarily with the industrials. Sandvik has come out with relatively good numbers, or met the expectations. We'll see that follow through with Investor, which holds a large number of these. Industry Varden as well, Kinnevik. These companies will give us a little bit more on how the economy is shaping and what we can expect going forward. What we saw in the United States was the tech sector continues to lay off people. So you did have lower than expected jobless claims, but now you see almost 100,000 people being laid off by tech companies. And you see savings programs coming in, like in Ericsson, which is not getting its 5G build out as expected, and will have to return to markets where it's traditionally had bribery issue problems, and will be laying off people and has to enact savings programs to cut costs. So it's a very turbulent time. Fundamentally, we don't have the fundamentals for the market to increase and improve. However, if you look at the market, the European market has outperformed the US market. So we're not dealing in reality, we're dealing in expectations. And it's a very interesting time, and really goes back to the point of you can always make money in the market, whether it's long-term or short-term. You can short stocks, you can go long stocks, you can play with options and hedge with derivatives. So it's really up to you to how you see the strategy. Fundamentally, the market is very weak. In terms of performance, the European market is outperforming the US market. In terms of what's happening in the world, it looks like the industrials continue to do well. However, their reports are giving different stories. So it's a lot to digest, and really we'll wish you the best and happy success in the market, and have a great weekend. Thank you very much.